Hi everyone, Armored Pants here, and we're back with another tank review. This is the Hybrid Nation Tier 7 MF FL10, also officially known as the Egyptian Sherman. Now this is in the shops right now, so let's have a review of this tank. But before that, just a quick reminder that, last month we set up the Discord channel with thanks to Economics Mate and some others who helped me out in that. For this YouTube channel, so Discord is now up and running. I'm there almost every day, so please come along and join us. You'd be most welcome, and there will be a link in the description. Now, let's have a look at the tech spec in this tank, and as always, we will use blitzhanger.com, which is a great asset for all blitzers. If you're not using it, I certainly recommend that you do. Now, this tank, as we said, is often known as the Egyptian Sherman. It is a French-Egyptian collaboration. Basically, M4 Sherman body, and it has a French gun system, right? In terms of being a premium tank, it has a credit coefficient of 140%, and it's currently in the stores now at €9.99, and it's fully equipped, comes with some avatars, some other stuff. So, but in terms of the bundle, it's good value for money, right? Nothing wrong with the price, nothing wrong with what you're getting, right? For a Tier 7 and a premium tank, this is a decent value. And it's not in crate, so you just pay your money and you get your tank, right? So what could be better than that? It also has a very interesting history in Blitz, because it was the first gun system to be an auto reloader. So that's therefore paved the way for the likes of the Progettos and the other auto reloaders that we now have in the game. So it has a very unique place in Blitz history. However, since its initial introduction, it has been power creeped. It has indeed been power creeped like a bastard, like the proverbial bastard power creeped. It has. Things like smashers, annihilators have kind of made this tank somewhat redundant. You can be two-shotted by a smasher or a annihilator. Other things like Lycons, etc. It finds it very difficult to pen. But in terms of the tank itself, I would set up the provisions like this: tin food, field rations, and improved fuel. Max out your view range and your tank performance. It has this 75mm auto reloader. It takes 4.26 seconds, 3.7 and 3.3 seconds for the shells to load, and takes 1.3 seconds per shell to fire. You get 480 burst damage, you get 160, 135, and 175 damage points with AP, APCR, and HE respectively. You've got 151, 212, and 42mm of pen with AP, APCR, and HE respectively. Now, in terms of muzzle velocity, it does 13 meters per second with AP and HE, goes up to 1625 meters per second, which is with your Pramo, which is APCR in this case. So bear in mind you get a boost on your speed of your shells with the Pramo. Its gun index is 10, so it's okay, but it is somewhat limited by its low caliber weapon and its pen numbers, and you're going to find this particularly difficult when you're up tiered. If you're trying to pen something like an IS-3 or something front on, it's very, very difficult in this tank. The mobility index is 7.6 because it has a very good top speed and it has great traverse, but the power to weight ratio is awful. I'm telling you guys, when you're trying to go up a hill in this thing, you may as well get out and walk. It is just fucking awful power to weight ratio. Sometimes it feels like the tank is just stuck in treacle when you're on difficult terrain. So please bear in that mind, it's quite a limiting factor of this tank. Concealment is also not great. A tank with 302 view range is going to spot you up within 240 meters if you're still. If you fire, that goes up to 254. That goes to 281, and it goes to 254 when you're moving. So you're going to be spotted often and early in this tank, so be aware of that. This is particularly important when there's things like smashers and annihilators on your team. If a smasher gets you from the side or behind, he can take you out one shot, as can an SU-152, etc. So you need to be aware of that, because if when we look here, we see it has very little armor. Okay, in an ideal situation, especially if you're up tier, if you're top tier and not up tiered, you can side scrape, but more or less, it has no armor anywhere on the vehicle. You are going to maybe bounce some shots on the turret because it's small and has those awkward angles. There's also some apex armor angles on the front, etc. You have this bit of spaced armor at the back, which if you're lucky will catch a HE round, but overall you don't have much armor. Another limiting factor is the gun depression. You only got 6 degrees, but you also only have 8 degrees of elevation, which means that it has really, really poor gun alignment. If you're not familiar with the term gun alignment, it basically means it is the ease with which you can align your gun with the enemy, and this has very, very bad gun alignment. It only has +7, -7 or 14 degrees in total up and down elevation, which is pretty bad, right? In terms of tactics with this tank, well, first thing I would say to you is avoid fucking smashers, annihilators, and SU-152s, etc. And of course that's not possible to do because there is a proliferation of annihilators now in Tier 7, and also a lot of very, very good players playing them. So you are going, right now as the game stands, find this tank a bit frustrating because it's poor power to weight ratio, it's poor gun alignment, it's poor pen numbers. And they kind of, offset the advantage of the excellent gun system. Because of this auto reloader, you can fire off your 3 rounds, and the longest you have to wait down for your next round is only just over 4 seconds, right? So it's really, really good gun system. But unfortunately, and especially when you're up tiered, but even when you're not up tiered, because of smashers and annihilators, this tank really struggles to perform really well. And as I said, it is being the victim of serious fucking power creep. If power creep were a person, you would need restraining order if you were this tank. Now, we're going to have a look at some gameplay here. Thankfully in this one I am not up tiered, so I have a bit more flexibility in my gameplay. So I look at the setup, etc. I decide to go towards B. Now, this tank is not a bad tank per se. When it came out, it was pretty good, and as I said, it introduced this amazing gun system, which is now a fixture within Blitz, so therefore it has a special place in Blitz history. But as a standalone vehicle now, leaving aside its history and, let's say, the affection that we have for it in Blitz, particularly those of us around when it was first introduced, it is not great. It struggles because of the power creep, because of some of the other tanks that have been introduced, right? When I was shooting a few of the games for this tank, and I hadn't really played it since it initially came out, one of the things that struck me was, this incredible power creep. Because obviously when this tank came out, there weren't annihilators, there weren't smashers in the game. So you didn't have that OP level of tanks, predatory tanks like the Smasher, etc., with those big AG guns, and the Annihilator with its 3-barrel Cerebus gun system. They weren't there, right? So this tank was a bit more effective. It still struggled when it was up tiered, but not as much as it does now, because now it struggles not only when it's up tiered but also in its own tier because of the introduction of these other tanks. Just want to show you here, the M41 is firing at me. He fluffs this shot. You can see the shell hitting the snow, and then he's going to bounce 2 shots off me. So you can get some bounces on this, but those bounces will come off the turret mostly. And slow it down so we can have a look at the bounces here in action. And normally from low caliber guns, you're not going to bounce anything with a high caliber gun. It's just not possible. It does not have the armor for that. You can see when it gets moving, it is pretty nimble, but like most tanks with American engines or American engine systems, because this originally has the chassis and body of an M4 Sherman, it struggles when it's to get up to that speed, and it struggles going up hills as like here. This is particularly a problem in mid to late game, when tanks are all over the map, right? Because what happens is, you can have something like a Smasher behind you, and if he's behind you or to the side of you and you're moving slowly up a hill, he has all the time in the world, even with that long aiming time, to line up on that pretty North African ass of yours and pop a massive Freddie Mercury round into it, which is gonna leave you like Frodo. And what do you mean by that, armored? Well, you recently had your ring destroyed. So don't be like Frodo, be very cognitive of where something like a Smasher is if you are particularly in the medium to end part of the game, when tanks are in different parts of the map and not necessarily on their side of the map. You can see here again with a low caliber gun like the 75mm here in the AMX, it is possible to get a bounce. That bounces off the apex where the armor plates meet. You can see that. I slowed that down because I wanted you to take note of it, because I didn't want to give you the false impression that this is something you can expect in this tank. You cannot expect that in this tank. What you can expect in this tank is the opposite, is to be penned like the most popular girl in school, often with frequency and with great abandon. So, you know, just be aware of that, guys, right? You know, this tank is not going to bounce too many shots on you, and I didn't want to give you a false impression, which is why I slowed it down so you could see that bouncing off the apex. And those bounces will only come when you are up against lower caliber gun systems like the AMX there and like the M41 Walker Bulldog. Overall, a decent performance of this tank. I played it to its kind of strengths, which is obviously its excellent gun system, but you know, you need to be aware of its limitations. And they are, it's terrible power to weight ratio, it's terrible gun alignment, and it's more or less lack of armor, which is going to really suffer if you're up tiered. It also has this lack of pen as well, so you're going to suffer in terms of trying to pen, especially if you're up tiered. I mean, if you're up against an IS-5 or something like that front on, forget about it. Even with APCR, forget about it. In terms of the setup, I would use calibrated shells, because you've got an auto reloader system. It doesn't really make too much difference to the reload time, so use them to get the extra pen. You need them because of that smaller caliber 75mm gun. Okay, so let's have a recap on of the key points of this tank. So, you know, I guess the first thing we should say is that this is good value for money, right? There's nothing wrong with it, and it goes straight into your garage. It comes fully equipped, which I think all premium tanks should. You know, that's a pet hate of mine when they sell a premium tank without full equipment, but this comes with it, and a few others, and some other stuff as well, right? It also has excellent gun systems, the first autoloader in Blitz, so it has a nostalgic value and is a special place in the heart of many blitzers. But, you know, it has a lot of limitations, one of which is the poor power to weight ratio, has poor gun alignment, which we also discussed. You know, it also has this, poor, acceleration when trying to go pills due to the power to weight ratio. And even though it has a decent mobility and gun index, you know, that's mainly down to top speed, the traverse, and things like the muzzle velocity. You know, but there are weak things hidden in there, so therefore you need to be aware of those, as for example like the poor penetration, and it really struggles when up tiered. And of course, even when not up tiered, it's been power creeped in its own tier by things like the Smasher, the Annihilator, the Lycan, etc. It's basically a 6-day war tank in the 21st century. If you're not familiar with the 6-day war is, it's a war in 1967 between Israel and some of the Arab nations, ostensibly Jordan, Egypt, Syria, and of course this tank would have featured in the Egyptian forces then. So, you know, with that said, you know, I think overall it is decent value, but please be aware before you buy it of its limitations, because you will find it a bit frustrating in Blitz as it is now. So cheers, Mush. Thanks for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable. I hope you found it useful. And I guess now all that remains for me to say is pants off.
That's all, folks.